Hi, everyone. Welcome to Both Sides of the Story, PBS 12's high school debate tournament. I'm your host, Alan Janae from CBS 4. Thanks for joining us tonight. Tonight, we'll feature the first semi-final round of our consolation bracket. This is a new feature in this year's tournament, which gives you a chance to see all of our students in action more often. These are our state's best debaters on tonight's show. Students from West Early College High School and Eaglecrest High School compete for a spot in this year's Consolation Bracket Championship. So let's meet our participants right now. First up, KiKai Edwards, a junior at West Early College High School in Denver. Let's meet KiKai.
My name is KiKai Edwards. I'm an 11th grader at West Early College High School. When I was a little kid, I think I was pretty mischievous. I was kind of a troublemaker. I just genuinely tried my hardest to learn new things, and I was always curious, but sometimes that ended up getting me into trouble. I think one of my favorite moments of debate was just being in the cafeteria with all the different teams in schools, because you could just feel all the positive energy, and everybody was so excited about their debates, and whether or not they had won or lost, they were just having a good time being there.
One of the unique things about KiKai that really stands out is that he has taken his skills as a debater to the practical world, where he's joined Student Voice and Leadership. And in that club, he is able to use his voice and his knowledge and his political context to speak out about social justice issues in our school community.
That's KiKai. Next up, meet Mason Bachman. He is a senior at Eaglecrest High School in Aurora. Here's his story.
I'm Mason Bachman. I'm a junior, so I'm in 11th grade, and I go to Eaglecrest High School. When I was a little kid, I'd say I was definitely pretty shy, actually. I used to be pretty introverted. I used to, never talk to that many people, just read a lot of books. Doing debate has definitely taught me how to be more outgoing just as a person, how to better interact with people, how to have better conversations. But I would also say it's definitely taught me, how to be more assertive and have better conversations when I'm trying to argue for the things that I really care about and believe in.
Mason is a very level-headed debater, and he's definitely a listener first and foremost. He listens so much in the debates to make sure that he knows what his opponents are saying, and because of that, I see him being really successful, because I always tell my students, my best debaters are my best listeners.
Mason Bachman, KiKai Edwards, those are our competitors. Also joining us, our special panel of experts who will offer their analysis of our debate tonight. They are Dominic Dezzutti, host of Colorado Decides, the election debate series produced in conjunction with CBS 4, and he is joined tonight by Omar Montgomery, the president of NAACP Aurora, Colorado, and a former mayoral candidate in Aurora as well. All right, time to set our ground rules. Each side will present their case. They'll ask each other questions and have a chance to offer rebuttals. When it is finished, we'll go to our illustrious panel for their own questions and find out whom they felt offered the best arguments. So let's get started. Here is the issue up for debate today. Should Colorado provide free higher education at its state schools to state residents? So let's have our coin flip and get things underway. KiKai, I'm going to let you make the call. What do you want, heads or tails?
I'll go with heads.
Okay, heads it is. What would you like, pro or negative?
I'll take the pro.
KiKai, as the proponent, will go first, and then we'll have our second person coming up. Mason will go second. So, KiKai, 3 minutes. The floor is yours to state the case in the pro right now. Go ahead.
Okay, so Colorado should provide free higher education at its state schools to state residents. First, I'll talk about how this would increase enrollment rates, then I'll move on to how this strengthens our workforce, and lastly, I'll cover how this positively impacts our economy. If Colorado were to provide free higher education to its state residents, we would have increased enrollment rates across the state. In the article, here's how much more expensive it is for you to go to college than it was for your parents, by Emmy Martin. The article states, students at public four-year institutions paid an average of $3,190 in tuition for the 1987 to 1988 school year, with prices adjusted to reflect 2017 dollars. 30 years later, the average has risen up to 9,970 for the 2017 to 2018 school year. That's a 213% increase. So this explains how much tuition prices have increased, and common sense would tell us that these increased prices are an obvious deterrent from enrolling in college. Eliminating the deterrent would allow more people to enroll, especially people from mid to lower classes, since a lot of people can't afford the prices of college as is. In addition to increased enrollment in our state, our workforce would be improved. With more state residents attending colleges and other now free educational institutions, graduation rates would increase and we would have more qualified individuals to fill the gaps in various industries. A Brookings article titled "Free College for All Will Power a 21st Century Economy and Empower Our Democracy" said that post-secondary education can also lead to certificates and open doors to thousands of well-paying jobs, including engine maintenance technicians, plumbers, electricians, dental hygienists, and radiologic technicians that will move them and our economy forward. This shows that a wide variety of professions would become available to college graduates, meaning that there would be less unemployed state residents and more workers available to be hired to those different jobs. In addition to this, the increase in the amount of high-skilled workers would increase the competitiveness of the workforce and improve the quality of services received, benefiting us as the consumers as well. The last point is pretty self-explanatory. With a stronger workforce and more people being hired, our state's economy would benefit in multiple ways. For starters, there would be more individuals putting money directly back into our circular flow of income. The same Brookings article said when President Franklin Roosevelt signed the GI Bill in 1944 and President Eisenhower signed the National Defense Student Loan legislation in 1958, millions of veterans, women, and minorities came to college because they could afford it and they knew that education beyond high school would make a significant difference in their future livelihood. They bought cars, took out home loans, worked hard, and advanced in their careers. They weren't burdened by enormous college debt. It's apparent that on multiple occasions where college was made free, the money earned from the graduates' post-college careers went back into the economy instead of being swallowed by an enormous loan debt. So in conclusion, the state of Colorado should make higher education free to state residents because if higher education was free, enrollment and graduation rates would increase, which would lead to a stronger, more flexible workforce, and that in turn would bolster our state's economy. Thank you.
KiKai Edwards, thank you very much. The big question tonight that we're talking about, should Colorado provide free higher ed at its state schools to state residents? KiKai in the affirmative, Mason in the negative. You have 2 minutes for any questions and cross-examination. Go ahead.
Okay. Does the topic specify the removal of any other existing student loan systems, like the Pell Grant program or things like that?
No, it doesn't specify that, but they would be less necessary for people that are state residents because higher education would already be free to them. So it wouldn't be as necessary for people to have to obtain a Pell Grant or any other kind of scholarships and things like that.
It's like the Pell Grant not already easily cover the cost of two-year community colleges, which are $3,000 a year, considering a Pell Grant can total up to $6,000 for the lowest income bracket?
That may be true, but there are a lot of four-year colleges and six-year programs within those colleges, and especially with universities and other higher education things. So the Pell Grant doesn't really cover as much as it probably seems to, especially because even if you are getting a Pell Grant for 2 years, that doesn't really cover the cost of an average, like the average amount of time that it does take to be fully qualified for a lot of jobs that are necessary.
How is Colorado's government supposed to fund a massive financial undertaking like a free college program?
So it would most likely come with a tax increase, but with the improvement to the economy based off of the stronger workforce and more people like working, we would be making more revenue and more taxes would be um like it would pay for itself after a certain amount of time because people are making more money, which means that they're able to afford higher taxes. So after a while, it would basically be the same, just you would have that small amount of a tax increase at the beginning, and then it would level out closer to not that far into the future.
All right, we'll have to cut off the questions right there. Mason Bachman, KiKai Edwards. Mason in the negative. The floor is yours for 3 minutes. Go.
Thank you. I stand in firm negation of the resolution that Colorado should provide free higher education at its state schools to state residents because of the fiscal infeasibility of funding and the income discrimination of such a program. Firstly, a program that comprehensively provides for free higher education at state schools, even if only for state residents, stands to be completely unaffordable for the government budget of Colorado. The Colorado Department of Higher Education provides that there are 214,011 resident students currently enrolled in public higher education institutions within the state. Calculating the average cost of attendance for community college and four-year public universities proportional to their attendance rates, the price tag for 1 year of state-subsidized public college comes out as a $1.76 billion price tag. In the status quo, this price is too high for Colorado to be able to afford. Colorado's budget does not have room for this vast of an expense, with the Colorado Sun writing that the number that loomed large in the deliberations on the state spending plan is the $3 billion estimated budget shortfall for the current and next fiscal year. Within the parameters of the current budget, especially incorporating the current strain imposed as a result of the coronavirus, the state budget has no room to fund a vastly expensive program such as today's topic. The only possible avenue to fund an initiative such as the resolution would be an increase in taxes, which stands to do more harm than help. Richard Vedder of Forbes writes that raising taxes on private sector earnings to fund colleges lowers growth because the output reduction associated with higher taxes on the highly efficient and market-directed competitive private sector is far greater than any positive effects of more education administered by less efficient and market-disciplined higher education providers. Funding a college subsidization program would damage the economy over benefiting it, and the program would be unfundable within the status quo. Secondly, subsidized programs targeted at creating free higher education disproportionately benefit upper and middle class students rather than students coming from lower class backgrounds. Lower income students who most desperately need this aid are more likely to be excluded from a program's benefits, with Third Way finding that for the lowest income students who receive a maximum Pell Grant of $6,095 this academic year, their tuition is almost 100% paid by the federal government's existing need-based aid program. So a last dollar free college plan would end up paying the tuition of the wealthy students who could otherwise afford to attend, while barely doing a thing to help the low-income students who actually need assistance. To further exacerbate this issue, the current crowded college system would be further burdened by an increased influx of people as a result of relieving cost strain. The burden put on the college system will push admittances over their capacity, with a study by MIT Economics finding that 20% of currently enrolled poor students will lose seats to wealthier students under a free tuition policy. A free college program harms the lower class more than any other societal group, revoking desperately needed opportunities from poor students and relegating poor students to community college as a price alternative. And clearinghouse data shows that 47% of community college enrollees drop out of school, prolonging the poverty trap and erasing opportunities that are normally provided to poor students. Considering the unfeasible cost reality of funding this in the status quo and income discrimination, I must strongly encourage a vote in the negation on today's resolution.
Mason in the negative, KiKai in the affirmative. The question, should Colorado provide free higher education at its state schools to state residents? KiKai, 2 minutes for your questions begins now. Go.
Okay, so can I have a quick summary of how making college free would damage the economy?
So as I quoted in my case, I have a report from Richard Vedder at Forbes, who actually found that the increased tax burden, because as you said earlier, it can't be funded without increasing taxes, the increased tax burden that they place on the average consumer in order to pay for these exorbitant programs actually has so much of a negative effect that it outweighs a positive benefit that could be placed on the economy by the freeing of college.
So do you think that all of the money that would be used to pay for this would come from taxes?
Well, as I said in my case, what we're currently seeing is that Colorado is under a budget deficit, which means it's struggling to pay for the programs that exist in the status quo, which includes the existing state grant programs and scholarship funding programs that are already subsidizing some poor students' college funds. But what we see is that by instead implementing this system, which, as I said in my case, would tally $1.7 billion for a state that's already under a $3 billion deficit over the next 2 years, there would have to be some kind of taxation or another funding alternative in order for this program to be conceivably funded within the status quo.
Okay, so don't you think that some of the money that comes from or that is already allotted towards different programs like that could be used to decrease the prices of the tax rates?
Well, what we see is that the topic doesn't actually establish that that is going to be the case, that these funds are going to be reallocated from currently existing programs to this new one. So we have to assume that those programs would stay in place. And what's more, what we find is that these programs are actually more advantageous for poor students. And the one that's being proposed on the docket today is actually going to help higher and middle income students more. So in terms of helping poor students who really need federal and state assistant money in order to get to college, we see that the optimal choice is to instead expand programs like the Pell Grant program rather than performing an undertaking of the nature of today's topic.
All right, KiKai, we'll have to wrap up your questions to Mason there. But as the affirmative, KiKai, you now have 2 minutes for a rebuttal. Go right ahead.
Okay, so in short, the plan is actually more beneficial for lower income students because the neg said that we should not assume that the money from different programs would be re-allotted to programs to make college free for state residents. But in reality, if college is free for state residents, there would be a major decrease in the need for those funding to go towards people that can't afford college because it would already be free for them. So we wouldn't have to have different kinds of scholarships, fundings, and Pell Grants, and that would become less relevant, meaning that we would have more money as a state to put towards making college free for all of the state residents, and that would decrease the amount that taxes are raised. And also, the neg talks about how this is discriminatory towards lower class um state residents, but in reality this is actually more helpful for them because higher class and middle class students, they are more likely to already pay for college as it is, but there are a lot of lower class state residents that can't afford college, and if we were to make it free for them, then we would see an increase in the amount of low income students are that would like take advantage of that, and we would see an increase in the amount of low income students that are actually attending colleges. So like I said, making higher education free to state residents would be better because it would lead to stronger, more flexible workforce, and it would help our economy as well as increasing enrollment rates for all classes of people. Thank you.
KiKai Edwards from West Early College High School, as well as Mason Bachman from Eaglecrest High School. The topic of today, free higher education to state residents at state schools. Mason, you now have 3 minutes to respond and close. Go.
All right, so just to begin, as I said prior, we cannot assume that these other programs would necessarily be diminished. In more likely reality, they would probably be retooled in order to subsidize other living necessities for poor college students. So we can't assume that the financial burden that currently exists under the current systems would disappear, because in fact it would stay in place. And so, firstly, I would like to talk about how but there's no viable way for us to fund this within the status quo. The coronavirus has left Colorado's government at a $3 billion deficit over the next 2 years. Factoring in the cost of this program over the next year being $1.7 billion, in order to fund this program, a major tax increase would be necessary as a very minimum. And in a state struggling to balance a deficit, Colorado simply does not have the liquid financial assets to dedicate towards funding a program of this scale. And what we see is my opponent said that my opponent did acknowledge that taxes would still see a raise even if these programs were to be retooled, because we do see that taxes would still climb significantly, because in the status quo, these programs are only designed to subsidize college for poor students, and expanding that net to afflict all students would have disastrous impacts. Now let's talk about why my points still stand. There's been no evidence to suggest that there's been no statistic to suggest that this actually pays for itself. What we see in reality is that in a state that's already running a deficit, this is unable to be paid for. So my first point stands. And then on to the second point of income discrimination. What we see is that lower class students are actually crowded out of the market by middle and upper class students in a free college scenario. I quoted in my case that 20% of lower class enrolled students would be forced outward, and this would be disastrous for lower class enrollment, which would increase the poverty gap, it would worsen societal issues, and it would worsen income discrimination. And what we see is that middle and upper class people are more likely to pay in the status quo. So what we see is that we need to direct our money towards Pell Grants, towards things that subsidize college for poorer students, while making sure that middle and upper class students are paying what they are able to pay. And on to my opponent's cases, as I said, it will not increase enrollment. As I said, it actually decreases enrollment for lower class students. And even though it does increase enrollment for upper and middle class students, what we see is that it actually crowds lower class students out who need it more. We see that the workforce isn't getting strengthened when these lower class students are relegated to community college and they aren't able to pursue the degrees they want because they're crowded out by upper class students. We see that a last dollar free program would pay for the wealthy and not the middle class. And we see that, as I stated in my first case, the tax burden would be detrimental to the economy instead of beneficial.
Mason Bachman in the negative. KiKai Edwards, you now have 1 minute to close in the affirmative. Go right ahead.
Yeah, basically, so there was like talks about the coronavirus and stuff, which they also mentioned like how high the current enrollment is, but that would already automatically be lowered because of the coronavirus. You're not going to have as many people that are flocking towards a college, so that doesn't really make as much sense to have that we would have struggles with that because of the coronavirus, but also that the enrollments would remain as high, and also tax cuts would not be as high. So I feel like I think that my points still stand, and it's better to vote for this resolution.
KiKai, thank you very much. Mason, thank you very much. Spirited debate on the topic of should Colorado provide free higher education at its state schools for state residents. Let's go now to our panel of experts and get their thoughts on what they saw. Dominic, take it away.
Thanks, Alan. Another great debate. Gentlemen did a wonderful job. An issue that Colorado's been talking about for a long time. We're going to go to our questions now from us. And Omar, as an adjunct professor at the University of Colorado Denver, this is hitting close to home. What's your first question for KiKai?
First, I just want to say this was a very spirited debate and enjoyed both sides. KiKai, are there any examples of how free college has impacted the economy, unemployment, or even a stronger workforce, as you suggested, in other countries that offer free college to their residents?
Yeah, it may be harder to see because they've had free college systems for longer than we have in some parts of our country. But like if you look at them in comparison with the US and see that they're still doing just as well as we are, then it stands to reason that we would be doing better if we weren't drowning in the debt that we have for like for college loans and stuff like that. And it just allows for a more competitive economy, and you can see that there are like improvements in the workforce because you have more people that are transferring out of this country to go to other colleges, which means that they are benefiting from that, and it makes sense that they have more people that are able to work there because college isn't as expensive, which is not holding as many people back from attending the colleges.
KiKai, quick question for me. Is there any guarantee that all the students that go to Colorado schools for free will stay in Colorado and therefore, with your theory, contribute to the tax base? They might go to other states.
Yeah, that is true. But with how many that already are here and that will remain to stay here, it would make sense that you see a larger proportion. So even if there are more people that are leaving, there would still be an increase in the amount of people that are here contributing to our state economy. So it would there would be more people that remain here, as well as more people that would leave. But an increase all around would still increase our economy.
Great, great job, Mason. Let's go to you with your question from Omar.
Mason, you brought up a lot about lower social economic communities being impacted by free college and probably being pushed out. Part of that reality is that Pell Grants only cover a certain amount. Students are walking out with close to $10,000 to $20,000 in debt, meaning that when they step out of college and go to their jobs, that they are already paying back loans, not able to purchase a home, not able to purchase a car, or contribute back to the society. Is there a valid argument that those who graduate from college without debt will be able to contribute financially back to their communities, back to the state, and back to the federal government where it offset the cost? Is there any value in that argument?
There is definitely value in that argument. By giving people the opportunity to come out of college with managed or less debt, they definitely get the chance to be more successful in society. But what we see is that making college completely free in the nature of the proposed topic today is not the way to do it. It actually crowds lower income students out of the economy, and it actually damages their prospects for the future. So in place of the current proposition, which is not functional, Colorado can't afford to cover the costs of every single college attendee, it would be a better idea to invest in programs that instead expand opportunities for lower income students.
Mason, a quick question for me. We already pay for education for our state residents through high school. What is really the problem with just extending that a few more years?
Well, what we see is that the total cost for education for students, usually from K through 12, usually amounts at $10,000. But what we see is when you suddenly change the price to the price of college, which can sometimes be at four-year universities within the state, $10,000 a year, the cost becomes significantly harder to manage and significantly harder to afford for the Colorado state economy.
Alan, give us a second so we can figure this one out. It's been plaguing Colorado for a while. Give us at least 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's for sure. A long-standing issue. Big question. We're going to give our panel a moment to consider whom they felt won this debate. That'll give me a moment to let you know tonight's debate wraps up our semi-final round. Starting next week, we'll feature our championship and third place matches in both of our brackets. Now, I've covered a lot of great issues important to everybody in Colorado. So to catch up on any of the episodes, you can go to pbs12.org. All right, panel, do you have a decision?
I think Omar and I could have probably talked about this and debated for another half an hour. You both did a fantastic job, KiKai, Mason. You both did your cases proud, and I think there's probably some legislators that would like your services in the very near future. But it's our job to pick a winner. We've got to be able to do that so we can move on to our third place in championship matches. Mason, we thought you offered the better argumentation, but you both did a great job. Mason, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Alan, back to you.
Mason, KiKai, thanks a lot. Terrific debate. Great look at the big issue right here of higher education and paying for it. And that means, Mason, you're going to go on now to our Consolation Bracket Championship. KiKai, we'll see you in our Consolation third place match. And you both gave our viewers a wonderful debate tonight, so we really appreciate it. You both should be very proud. That is all the time we have for our program tonight, and I want to thank our excellent students for accepting our challenge as well as participating in our debate. And I also want to thank our esteemed panel for sharing their thoughts. And finally, we want to thank you for tuning in. It's the support of viewers like you and our sponsors that help to make this show a reality. You can catch up on past episodes of this program at pbs12.org. You can catch me on CBS 4 for all the latest news and information impacting Colorado. And for everybody here at PBS 12, I'm Alan Janae. Thanks for watching, and that is Both Sides of the Story.